Joining us now is Cara Crabb-Burnham from CCB Consulting, founder of CCB Consulting, in fact, and joins us to talk about the state of the cannabis industry in Massachusetts and New England. Cara, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So just by way of reset, can you talk to us about what space CCB Consulting actually occupies and what is just the status of legal cannabis in New England?
My consulting company focuses primarily on people who have acquired a provisional license.
Okay.
So they've done the initial application and they're good to go forward.
So provisional license would be I've applied to the state of Massachusetts
Yeah.
to open a retail location of one sort or another.
And then they're working on several more steps. So there's the
Okay.
ARC review process. There's maybe finding investors, designing the facility, managing the build out, strategizing their business model, products they're going to make, equipment they're going to use, and then getting them through the compliance requirements for opening and inspections, and then I set them off on their way to do great things, and hopefully they don't have to call me for problems, but we'll do renewals together annually and check in with them as they need help.
So I want to focus instead for a little bit, aside from the recreational piece, onto the medical side, which has been around for a fair bit longer, but still very different state by state. And I'm curious about when you're talking about Pfizer doing a new drug study. Obviously, there's a federal program where they can register this under. How can or cannot not work with cannabis today, given the legality on the federal level? Like if somebody wants to study the effectiveness of cannabis for treating XYZ, how does that work and how is it different than a traditional pharmaceutical company, for instance?
Well, there's a handful of colleges that have spaces where they can do specific kinds of research studies on cannabis, but because of the federal one status, Schedule 1 status, they are not able to do the more traditional studies that the pharmaceutical industry does.
So a federal level 1 status would put cannabis effectively on the same level as
Heroin.
Yeah. Other narcotics. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
They don't let you test heroin on people.
No, they generally do not. So when it comes to, it does seem like an industry that has been changing pretty rapidly over the last few years. You're around this every day. How do you see views on this I'm going to go from the political level. Like I know you talk to people every day, but do you see traction being gained on the federal level among politicians of their views on what this should and should not be used for?
I think generally studies show that the population across the United States generally supports medical marijuana as a medicine, that this plant does help people. And they know, it seems these days that everybody knows somebody who's tried cannabis for something and it was helpful.
Yeah.
I think the politicians understand that. I don't think they're not aware of it, but I think that it's incredibly complicated to understand how to set regulations that make sense
Sure.
because they're going to look at it through a lens of how we've done things previously. But it's not. This plant is natural. It's not like a pharmaceutical. Unless you're going to separate every single cannabinoid and reformulate it and put it into little pressed pills, you're not even going to get close to the same effect that you get when you consume cannabis with all of its natural cannabinoids and terpenes together. It's a totally different effect. And this is what we saw from patients who were prescribed Marinol and patients who used, whole cannabis plant products, is that they did not have the same effect and they have much better effects from whole plant products.
And are we seeing those studies being done, I guess, is my question. Because to your point, you can't really study it in a lot of federal testing type of situations. It seems to be exclusively occurring at a few limited universities, is your point?
There's some universities that have studies. There's a lot of studies from outside of our country, though. Israel has been doing studies on this forever. And there's there's a I can't remember, national There's a I will find it out for next week.
Okay.
But there is a website where you can go to find all of the studies. And my friend Maggie, who's listening right now, is going,
Yelling
Cara, she's screaming. Yes, no, there is a website where you can find all the studies. I will have that for you next week. But there are not a lot of studies that are critically accepted among the community of
Scientific
physicians.
community. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is happening there? What seems to be changing in your mind on the viewpoints of just everyday people when it comes to cannabis and the acceptance in the medical community in particular. Like, I feel like there has been changes here in Massachusetts and maybe in the other states to legalize things on the medical side of things, but are there real changes occurring either in the legislation when it comes to this that you see things improving or not improving? And what are the key areas you're looking at?
Well, I try to look at the data that we can collect from people who are ill. And for example, Medicare put out a statement a couple of years ago that every state that had legalized medical marijuana had seen a lower pharmaceutical use rate. So I have a feeling the pharmaceutical industry is a lot less excited about this than some other industries. I think that a normalization of cannabis medicine that people can grow in their own house and consume in a variety of different ways, however they see fit, is going to disrupt the pharmaceutical industry a bit.
Do you see that as the key? Like, if somebody, I don't know, I go back to, a large conglomerate that would want to really take advantage of this if it were federally legal. But like, where do you see the actual growth opportunities? Because frankly, recreational usage of marijuana seems to be occurring, whether it's legalized in a state or whether it's not. I have no idea how those figures, tune out. But where do you see the big business opportunities when it comes to cannabis, I guess, is my big question.
Well, it's an interesting question. So in Massachusetts, and this is just my opinion based on my experiences, but my impression is that in 10, 15 years, when we have a legal cannabis market across the country, it's going to be very difficult for these large-scale facilities to stay profitable. I think that the smaller indoor facilities that can claim craft cannabis are going to be highly successful in the Massachusetts market and in the New England market moving forward. When it costs up to $800 to grow a pound of marijuana in Massachusetts at a large scale facility, versus the $50 it costs to grow a pound of marijuana on a 12-foot tall cannabis tree out in Emerald Triangle, California, when that can come over. There's no way.
Kind of resets things.
It doesn't cost $700 to move a pound across the country. So we're going to be looking at, it's going to be hard to keep up.
That's so fascinating when you think about it in that context of, companies have to do business just in Massachusetts, can't move it across the country. And then, I mean, could you have a scenario where some of these companies are put out of business in the event of federal legalization? That's a real threat. And I hope that the governments and the bodies that are considering all this take that into, put a lot of thought into how to prevent that. I think that the testing labs, when we have federal standardization on testing, I think they're going to have to all recalibrate their machines. They're all going to have to get on the same page. There's going to be plating versus PCR. It's going to be a national debate. I mean, there's going to be a lot that goes into it. I know somebody who has a petition into the CCC right now that they want to see legal marijuana brought into the state of Massachusetts. That it's unconstitutional for you to not allow it in. But if it has to meet this state's testing requirements, that means the machinery in the origin state has to meet Massachusetts testing requirements and standards. So there's this whole there's a physical calibration that has to happen in order for that to make sense, and that would be something all of the regulators between the states need to agree on. I don't see federal legalization coming for a while, but I do see the opportunity for brands, a huge opportunity for brands right now. They have tons of these facilities that are up, and if you go to a Massachusetts retail store, you are going to find chocolates and gummies and chocolates and gummies. But if you have a really cool product idea, you can develop your brand and find a manufacturing company that will white label with you. Well, I suspected there was a reason that Martha Stewart was so interested in this, and I don't think it was for the pure medical benefits. So yeah,
she's
I
making
suspect
cookies.
You're right.
Those Martha Stewart cookies.
That's right. Cara Crabb-Burnham, founder of CCB Consulting, joining us again today to talk about the state of the cannabis industry across Massachusetts. Cara, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.